Okay, so when I was in fifth grade, this kid that sat next to me told me to make a Google Doc and add him and my other friend onto it. So I did it, and we were just like chatting the whole time in this Google Doc while we were supposed to be working on our essay. And we slowly started adding more and more people onto it. And this one day, I wasn't at school, and they were still using the group chat. And my mom got an email from the teacher saying that I created a group chat with the whole class and that I was going to be in trouble. So it turns out my friends added the whole entire class onto it. And some of these kids were sending pictures of the teachers into this group chat. And then one of the kids who was in the group chat told on us for starting the group chat. And he actually also got in trouble because he was communicating through the group chat.
Original story behind Snow White. Keep in mind, in the movie Snow White was 14, in the book she was 7. After everything happens in the movie, when she runs away, the queen sends the huntsman to kill her and get back her heart and her liver. But he kills a boar instead, and the evil queen, thinking it was Snow White's, she cooks it and eats it. And when she finds out that it's not, she sends her traps. A corset that's too tight that the dwarfs save her from, a poisonous comb that the dwarfs save her from, and finally the apple, and that's when she drops dead. Now, thinking she was dead, they put her in the glass coffin. Then the prince comes along, and having never seen her before, he insists on taking her away. Keep in mind, she is 7 years old. He trips while carrying her, which causes the apple to unlodge from her throat, which makes her wake up, obviously, and then they get married, even though she's 7. And during the ceremony, the evil witch has to wear burning iron shoes and dance until she dies. What makes it more disturbing is that she was 7 years old the entire
This is why you never go to the well on your own. In 1983, a young boy was camping with his family on Roan Mountain in North Carolina when his mom asked him to head on down the path and get some water from the well. When the boy didn't return, his mom went to check on him and he was gone. A massive search party was launched to find him, but with temperatures rapidly dropping and finding no trace of him, the family braced for the worst. Then, miraculously, on the 7th day of the search, the boy shows up on the mountaintop in an area they had already searched, healthy and clean. When they asked the boy, "Where have you been?" he said he had been at the well when a tall, faceless man showed up behind him, scooped him up, and brought him to the top of the mountain where he kept him in his cabin all week. After the boy gave a very detailed description of exactly where this cabin was on the mountain, the police were eager to go find it and confront this guy. But the park superintendent just raised his hand and said, "Guys, it's pointless. I've worked here 40 years. There are no cabins on Roan Mountain." This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, "Well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open." She's like, "I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either." Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, "You ever see any ghosts walking around your attic?" Her face got completely serious, and she's like, "As soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years." This is what they meant when they said, "Don't talk to strangers." In the early 1900s, a 10-year-old boy was playing in the woods when a tall man appeared and asked if he wanted to come back to his cabin for dinner. Totally caught off guard, the boy reluctantly agrees and begins walking. When they get to the cabin, the boy is relieved when he sees Paul, a family friend, sitting on the porch, so the boy happily goes inside. After they eat, the boy says thank you to the strange tall man, says bye to Paul, and then he leaves. He had only walked a few steps when he sees his family, along with Paul, running up the path towards him, frantically asking if he was okay. Confused, the boy says, "I'm just fine." And he looks at Paul and he's like, "Why didn't you tell them I was with you at the cabin?" And he points over his shoulder. Paul glances over the boy's shoulder and then narrows his eyes and says, "You were kidnapped by a cult 3 days ago. No one's seen you." Terrified, the boy turns around to look at the cabin he just came from, and it's gone. All he sees is a dark forest that stretches for miles. This is why you should never stay in sketchy motels. In 2005, a young woman on a solo road trip across the country decided to stop for the night. The first place she sees is the Mountaintop Motel. It looked pretty cheap, but she was tired, so she said good enough. The check-in guy eyed her up and down very uncomfortably and then asked her if she was traveling alone. She ignores the question, pays for her room, and then walks away with the key. When she gets inside her room and sees there are literally cockroaches in her bed, she says nope and decides to sleep in her car in the parking lot. Around 3 a.m., she wakes up to see the check-in guy using his own keys to get into the motel room she was supposed to be in. A few minutes later, he storms out and slams the door and starts walking towards her car. Terrified, she hides under her blanket as the man tries to open her car doors but can't and walks away. She speeds off and calls her friend and asks her to look up the address of Mountaintop Motel so she can give it to police. Her friend's quiet for a second and then just says, "The Mountaintop Motel closed a week ago." This is why you should always sleep with your lights on. In 1991, a man named Christopher Case was found dead in his bathtub, fully clothed in the fetal position. When police interviewed his best friend Sammy, she told them about a very disturbing phone call she got from him the night before he died. On the call, he told her that the previous night he had woken up to what sounded like whispering coming from underneath his bed. When he went to look, he couldn't move. As he laid helplessly, he watched a black figure pull itself out from underneath his bed. Once it was fully upright, it reached down and began choking him until he passed out. The next morning when he came to, he felt his neck and it was swollen and bruised. And then he saw blood on his hands and he saw that there were deep, uniform incisions on each of his fingertips. As he's saying all this to Sammy and telling her how scared he is to go to bed that night, he suddenly stops and he says, "I hear whispering outside my room." Then the phone went dead. This is why you should be careful what you put in the mail. In 2015, a man was asked by his neighbor to collect his mail while he was gone for a few weeks. A few days later, a large package arrives on his neighbor's front porch. The man can barely lift it, but gets over to his garage where he accidentally drops it and hears something break inside. Hoping his neighbor would think the damage occurred en route, he closes his squeaky garage door and forgets about it. But over the next couple of days, whatever was in that package started to smell so bad that he decides to open it up. Inside were two very important finds, his neighbor, who was dead, and a camera that was still recording. The police bring the man in for questioning and show him what was on the camera inside the box. It starts with his neighbor talking to the camera about how excited he is to mail himself home for his YouTube channel. Then, police fast forward to the very end where they see that the neighbor is now sleeping in the box, and then suddenly gets dropped and you hear a crack, and that's his neck breaking. And then you hear a squeaky garage door close.
Story time about me being the toxic best friend. So my best friend was dating this guy for about 1.5 years. And for the past 6 or 7 months, she would say that she wasn't happy, she didn't like how she was being treated, but she couldn't leave him. Well, at this time they lived together, and that night we were supposed to decorate her apartment for her birthday party. So since she was at work, she just told me to go over her house and start decorating until she got home. Well, who happened to be there but her shitty-ass boyfriend? And him and I didn't really get along. Well, him and I were setting up and he was being super nice. Like, overly nice. Which really weirded me out. Well, later on after the party, my best friend was hammered, so we both put her to bed and started cleaning up. And we were both drunk and started flirting with each other. And then one thing led to another. And I did it with my best friend's boyfriend in her house. So for the next 3 months, we have like this secret relationship, like for part 2. Part 2 to me being the toxic best friend. So like I said, him and I had this secret relationship for like 3 months straight. And I would always just go over to my best friend's house while she was working and see him then. Well, the one day she came home early from work. And she walked in on her boyfriend and I in her bed. So after that, she finally got the courage to leave her boyfriend. And now she's happily married. So I kind of saw it as I pushed her to do something that she knew she would never do. And after having my number blocked for like 3 years, she texts me and she says, "I wanted to thank you for what you did. You showed me that I could leave my boyfriend and that you were actually just a terrible friend. But now I'm happy for her. She's living the best life that she can live, and I'm still with her ex-boyfriend." Story time about my toxic ex-friend group. So my freshman year, I had moved to a new high school. So right away, I started being friends with this group of girls, and they were super nice. And I was also friends with this group of guys. Well, since I was friends with both groups, we all started hanging out all the time, but only whenever I was there. The boys just didn't want to hang out with the other girls. And after a few months, the girls started acting really strange. So anytime that I would hang out with the boys and not invite them, they would ignore me for a whole week. Meaning they wouldn't talk to me in school, they wouldn't answer my messages, or anything like that. Not a single one of them. And also, anytime that we hung out, they would be like, "Oh, invite the boys." And it was like they never wanted to hang out with me. So the one night, one of the boys was throwing a party. And I was going, and the girls asked if they could come, but they had drama with a lot of people, so the boys didn't want them coming, but I invited them anyways. Like for part 2. Part 2 to the toxic ex-friend group story time. So, I invited them to the party, they showed up, and they were being really rude and standoffish the whole entire night. And these girls literally hated it whenever I would hang out with the boys or talk to the boys. Come to find out that every single one of the girls had a crush on every single one of the guys that were in my friend group. Also, I'm a very friendly person and will talk to anybody, and they got pissed off whenever I was talking to anybody who wasn't them. So a little bit into the party, I start getting a lot of dirty looks from a lot of different girls that I've never even talked to. And this girl walks up to me and she's like, "Why have you been Snapchatting my boyfriend?" And I'm like, "Girl, what are you talking about?" She goes, "A few of your friends told me that you like my boyfriend and that you've been Snapchatting him and trying to get with him." So then she calls the girls over from my friend group and goes, "Didn't she tell me this?" And they're like, "Yeah, she tries to get with everybody's boyfriend." So after that, I got kicked out of both friend groups because they spread a bunch of lies and rumors about me.